All right, students. So our next video is part four. So right now, your mole that you guys put, which for me is the Phineas icon, should make a sound when you touch it. Okay, that was the last video that you watched. Now for this one, we need our good sprite, which is Phineas, to move to random spots on our canvas. Okay. Now, we didn't really go over this, but if you guys remember when I showed it to you, my mole, my sprite, was kind of hopping around to different parts of the canvas randomly, and that's what we want because we're making a game out of this. And if the sprite is going to the same spot every single time, it's very easy to predict where it's going to go. So if it's hopping around to different spots, it's very difficult to figure out where it's going to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in some code to have our sprite move to random spots on the canvas. All right. So what we need to do first, just like we did with when the good sprite is touched, we always have to start with our event. All right. Now this is a little tricky if you tried this out on your own. But a clue that you guys could see in the instructions that I put is we're going to use the clock, okay? The clock one right here. And basically, what the clock is going to be used for, it's going to be used to kind of move things around automatically for us. Like every certain amount of seconds, we can have different things happen in our app. Okay, so we're going to go into clock one, and there's only one event associated with a clock, and that is when clock one timer due. So basically, what we want to happen is when the clock, what they call fires. So every time it fires, it could be 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And we're going to set that number, and I'm going to show you where to do that in a second. We can have something happen. Okay. So if I go back into Designer and I click on my clock one, all right, right here where it says timer interval, all right, this is how long it's going to take the timer to fire. So right now, this is 1,000 milliseconds. So 1,000 milliseconds is 1 second. So every 1 second, our Phineas, our mole, is going to go to a new spot on our canvas. Okay. If we wanted it to change every 2 seconds, we could change this to 2,000. So the higher this number is, the more time it's going to take for Phineas to move around. And you'll see in the next couple of parts, we're going to mess with this number a little bit. All right. So we're just going to leave it at 1,000, which is 1 second. So every 1 second, this mole or sprite is going to bounce to a new spot. Okay. So we have when clock timer, which is going to be 1 second. Okay. We're going to go into our good sprite. All right. Because this is what we're programming. All right, now we don't need any yellow blocks because we already have our yellow block here. All right, but if you look through the purple blocks, all right, which one do you think we need? All right, basically what we want to happen is if I go back to Designer, okay, now I'm going to move my mole to the middle of my screen. All right, I'm going to move this over here. My mole right now is at X coordinate 120 and Y coordinate 117. So every 1 second, I want this to move to a different spot. And as you can see, my X and my Y value are changing every time I move my sprite. Okay. So we need these numbers to change every time the clock fires. So we're going to go back into our good sprite. All right. Now, if you look, there is a couple blocks that have this X and Y. And we're going to put in the call good sprite move to. Now, there's an error, and it's going to keep that error is going to keep coming up until I figure out what goes in these slots. Okay. Now, basically, what we want to happen is we don't want a specific number in there because every 1 second that sprite would go to that number and basically it would stay at that number. And that's not what we want. Okay. So we want it to go to a random number that is somewhere on our canvas. Okay. So again, I'm going to leave this up here for now because if not, it's just going to keep going. So I'm going to go into math. I'm going to hit dismiss. I'm going to go to math. And I'm going to bring in our random block that we used in some other apps. Random integer. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to duplicate that. Okay. And we have random integer. All right. So basically what this is going to do, and we're going to have to change these numbers, is I want the X value to be random and I want the Y value to be random. Now we have to be careful with what numbers we type in here. So if you think back, how big is our canvas? How many pixels is our canvas? So if I go back to designer and I look at my canvas, I have 340 height and 340 width. So my number of my X and Y value has to be between 1 and this number, which is 340. Okay, because if I do, let's say 500, 500 is going to be off the canvas and I'm not going to be able to see my sprite. So we want a number between 1 and 340 for both the X, which is horizontal, and the Y, which is up and down. So I'm going to go back into here. Again, that's going to keep coming up. Change this to 340. Change this to 340. I'm going to pop these back in here. Now, if you look, it might be tough to see. Okay, I'm going to hold this up. Every 1 second, that Phineas is moving to a different spot on the canvas. And it's a random number between 1 and 340. Now, if I change this number, let's just say 1 to 20 and 1 to 20. All right. Now, my Phineas is going to still move, if you guys can see, but he's only moving up in this top corner because it's only between numbers 1 and 20 in the X and the Y value. So that is up here in that corner. So he's moving in random numbers, but it's not a very big area because 1 to 20 is that little corner, right, which would be this corner up here. Right? So if I look, say I have negative values. So there we go. X is 1 and Y. So it would be somewhere up in this top left corner. Okay, so that's why we need 1, 2, 340. Now, if you want to take it a step further, just to kind of see him move a little quicker, if you go to your designer and you go to clock, you can mess with this timer interval. So again, right now, our Phineas is moving every 1,000 milliseconds, okay, which is 1 second, all right, every 1 second. So if you count 1, move, 1, move. Now, if I change this to 500 milliseconds, which is half a second, watch how fast he moves. Right, so every half a second, he's now moving. Now, what if I change it to 1 millisecond, which is super quick? That's the lowest you can go. Watch. Okay, so every 1 millisecond, Phineas is moving, and now it looks like there's a bunch of them. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and put this back to 1,000. Put it back to 1,000, and now he's back to normal. All right, so that number, we can make this game harder or easier depending on how fast or slow Phineas goes, and we are actually going to be doing that here very shortly. All right, so if I touch Phineas, it should make a sound. It does, and he's moving to random spots, which is this code right here. All right, so hopefully that helps you out there with, that was part 4. All right, and then once that video is done, just keep on moving down the list, and there may be another video there. So good luck.